Star Wars fans, welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video and welcome to episode 34 of Asks Bossk's Bounty. This is the weekly series where you guys get to ask me questions in the comment section below and I do my very best to answer them each week. So we've got a packed episode this week, so if you do enjoy this video, don't forget to drop a like down below because that really does help the video and the channel in general. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe as well. And with all that being said, let's get right on to the first question. App Chaser says, awesome video as always. Thank you very much, my friend. Last year, you mentioned a couple of times that you had a reliable source confirming the Vintage Collection Millennium Falcon in 2020. Any updates on that? Thank you very much. So, yeah, I did hear a rumour last year about the Vintage Collection Millennium Falcon making a reappearance, and I kind of put that out as a rumour. Got a bit of stick for it, I must admit, on some Facebook groups saying fake news, and I was spreading this, that and the other, and you know, I had no reliable source and what have you, but I was still convinced that it was going to happen. And thanks to Jason over at Yakface, he has actually confirmed that there is a Millennium Falcon coming out for the Vintage Collection. It's going to be based around Galaxy's Edge, so it's a little bit different to what I originally thought or heard. I thought it might have been just a straight repack of the Legacy Collection Falcon, but it looks like it's going to be a little bit different, based around Galaxy's Edge, so we don't really know what that's going to entail and whether it's going to have pack-in figures or what features it's going to have or anything like that just yet. I'm not sure if anyone's ever seen any pictures of it whatsoever, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But good news, we are indeed getting a Millennium Falcon, so that is the update and it's all good news. Crispy Greedo has another question about the Millennium Falcon. He says, what are your thoughts on the price increase of the rumoured Galaxy's Edge Falcon? $400 is way more than the $100 price range it was around in 2009. Why the increase? Slave one can be argued because it had a new paint job. So I'm sure this one will have a new paint job. You know, that's inevitable. $400 does sound a lot though, doesn't it? But obviously we don't really know yet what it's going to include. It might have 4 pack-in figures. It might have a load of new features, loads of new electronics, different sounds. We just have no idea at this moment in time of what it's going to be included. So we're just going to have to wait and see. So proof will be in the pudding once we know what's involved, and then we can judge whether the price tag of $400 is right or not. But I'm guessing it probably won't be. I'm guessing that everyone will think it's a little bit overpriced, but that's just the general way things are these days. Liam Ross says, great video yet again. Thank you, Liam. Will you ever do a collection showcase? So I have been promising this for quite a while now, but basically the truth is that I needed to get these shelves to complete the room, and without those shelves I cannot have my my vintage mocks on display, and that's a really important part of my display and my collection that I want on show. So until I get those shelves up, I cannot do the room tour. But the shelves have now arrived. I just need to put them up. It's just a bit difficult, the internal wall and things like that. I've got to get the proper screws for it and things like that. You don't need to know all this, but it's difficult for me to get these shelves done. But hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks, the shelves will be up. The mint on card figures will be up on those shelves, and then I can record the room tour for you. M Stitch V says, question for you, Bossk. What do you think the Haslab will be? Honestly, I can't imagine what it will be. I'm guessing it's something as big as the barge, perhaps a Razor Crest or the Wanted Ghost. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's great news, isn't it, that the next Haslab project will be for the Vintage Collection once again. That is just fantastic news. Will it be as big as the barge and as expensive as the barge? I think it probably will be, because Patrick on the live stream did say that you need to start saving now, because apparently people left feedback saying that they wanted more time to prepare for the barge. So that does lead me to believe that it is going to be quite a large item. But in all honesty, of course, I do not know what that thing is going to be as of yet. I'd love to know. I can't wait until we find out. Obviously, I think for it to be really successful, it does tend to have to be the original trilogy, something from the original trilogy. So that leads me to think that maybe it could be maybe a Death Star playset, or perhaps the Tantive 4 possibly we've talked about before. I'm also thinking that it could be a sandcrawler. I mean, if you had a really big detailed sandcrawler with all of the droids, and then you could maybe even customize it to be the one from the Mandalorian as well, that would be pretty awesome. So who knows on that front? We don't know yet, but I've got a feeling it will be original trilogy based. Perhaps if you're going to pick one thing that's not from the original trilogy, then it could possibly be the Razor Crest, but let's wait and find out. Rob S722 says, hey there, boss. Good stuff as always. My question is, do you think that Kenner Hasbro will ever finish the 98 in the vintage collection? And do you know how many are left of that 98 to make? Keep up the great work. Yeah, I mean, I think it's 96, isn't it? The original figures. I don't know whether you're counting maybe the R2-D2 with the third leg in that, but who knows? I always thought it was 96, but I think there's about 20 or 25 still for them to do. I've lined up a few here for you to see now. So these ones we definitely do need still. We 100% need Squid Head and Bib Fortuna. We've got Hammerhead to do. We need an Ugnaught. I know they've done some of these figures in previous lines, but we're talking about the vintage collection on vintage cards. A card exactly like that. We need a new Bib Fortuna. I've actually done a whole video series around the missing figures from the original vintage line. I'll leave a link to the playlist in the description below so you can check those videos out. Yeah, it just talks about all the missing original vintage figures that are still yet to be done in the vintage collection. Jackson C, which Revenge of the Sith clone commander would you want to see in the vintage collection? So obviously we have had Commander Cody already. We've had Gree. We definitely need Rex. That would probably be my obvious answer, but I would also say that I would like Commander Bly, a new updated figure like this. They've done him in the Black Series, so why not give him us in the vintage collection as well? I realise he's only in the Revenge of the Sith for a brief moment near the end with Order 66 and everything, but he would be cool to have on a vintage card nonetheless. Emerson Alder says, cool video as always. My question for your next video is, how much do you think Hasbro makes on each figure after VAT, tax, retailers margin and production costs? I would not know, if I'm honest, how much Hasbro make, because obviously they make these things in the thousands or hundreds of thousands. It's impossible to know. What I do know is that retailers probably make about 40% on a figure, I do believe. So if a figure's $13 in the vintage collection, I've got a feeling that they pay about $8.50, depending on how many they order, of course. But is that 40%? I don't know my maths, but essentially I think they would pay about $8 for each figure and would sell them for about $13.99. So they would make about $5 or $6 per figure. Chris Rosa says, hey boss, great video as always. Thank you, Chris. Question, I recently decided to sell parts of my collection and I know I have some quite valuable items, but I definitely do not want to overprice them for fellow collectors. Any recommendations on how to price items? Thanks and keep up the great work. So I think I did answer this actually on the comment as well, but I wanted to just say to you guys on the video, this is how I would personally do it. So I would look at sold listings on eBay and I would get an average selling price over the last maybe 3 months, for example. And then I would remove maybe 10% because eBay take 10% fees. So you don't want to pass those fees onto a collector. And then maybe you want to take another 5% off for goodwill or whatever. That sounds pretty reasonable to me. So if you're looking at eBay, people selling figures maybe 15 to 20% less than they go for eBay. And I think that's a pretty good price from a collector to another collector. Force Father says, hey Bossk, love this show. Question, do some of the Black Series 6-inch scale vehicles and accessories also work with 3.75-inch figures? For example, the new Snow Speeder or Ray Speeder and Luke's Land Speeder. I always wondered how it would look. So I don't have I don't have Ray's Speeder or Luke's Land Speeder in the 6-inch, but I do have the Snow Speeder. I recently did a review on it and I can tell you right now that 3.75-inch figures would not look great with that at all. It'd be far too big, far too out of scale. It definitely has been designed for the 6-inch figures. And I would imagine that that is probably the same for other vehicles and accessories of the 6-inch line. They are specifically made for 6-inch figures and would look a bit silly really if a 3.75-inch figure was holding like a huge 6-inch Black Series blaster, for example. I don't think it'd look great. Blockade Runner 77 says, hi Bossk, would you like to see a pod racer in the vintage collection? And if so, which racer and pilot? Doesn't have to be Anakin. Yes, absolutely. I would love to see a pod racer in the vintage collection. I think it's a pretty decent idea in actual fact. Which one would I like to see? I would probably like to see Sebulba's, the big orange one. I think they made a pretty decent Lego model out of that one once upon a time. And I think we also need a decent updated Sebulba figure to go with it as well. So that's not actually a bad shout. All right then, guys, that's it for this week's episode of Ask Bossk Bounty. Thank you very much for your questions. If you do have a question for next week's episode, please leave it in the comment section below and I hopefully will get round to answering it for you. Thanks very much for watching. Drop a like. and we shall see you on the next one.